Good. So today, am I speaking loud enough, by the way, for the back? Yeah? Okay, so rules. How many rules have you considered that you follow on a daily basis? Rules that belong to the country you're in or the country that you're from? Unspoken rules like not to be rude to people, or rules that are made up online. Rules are everywhere if you start to think about it. And today I want to talk about colonizing Mars and creating a new society from scratch based on rules. And I want us to do it together, but at first I'm going to give you a bit of a context, and then we're going to set some sort of rules up. And as Maria said, I'm a lawyer. Not like that. But my main interest at this moment is legal theory and legal philosophy. And legal philosophy is understanding human behavior in context of law, but also understanding law in context of human behavior. So for what we're doing now, that means, what is the legal system? Why do we have legal systems? And to answer that question, we need to look at how societies are built. And legal systems don't really exist in a vacuum. They're linked to how we perceive ourselves as communities. So if you're alone in the wilderness, you're probably not going to have a legal system and even rules because it's just you. And even if you were the group of people, you probably won't have rules either because it's very informal in that sense. But there's this magical number that says 150 people above, you need organization. So if it's lower than that, it's more based on how you know people and the peer pressure that you are subjected to make you obey, either unspoken rules or spoken rules. But above 150, you need something to keep people together, some kind of glue. And this is always based on a common belief or myth.
Janet,
yes.
You might need to.
Oh no, focus. Sorry? Focus, big F. I'm going to change that. Thank you. So, common beliefs or myths, and this have been either historical, like tribes or churches or religion, and it can also be something more modern, like a corporation believing in their mission. So it's a myth of different kinds. And these myths inform what kind of societies that we create. So it could either be that we want to be kind and generous, we might want to be strict and really judgmental, or flexible or really unpredictable. And all these values kind of melt in together to the legal systems that we have, and most of them have something of everything in them. And what we don't know is that this is a part of every system that we have right now. And we're just accepting it because that's how it is. We're not really digging deeper into the why. But now we have an opportunity to step into something unknown and envision a new society on Mars. And what kind of values do we want to bring with us? What kind of societies do we want to create, and why? And how can we go about making the best possible communities happen? So life on Mars will look a little bit different from what life looks like here. And to bridge the gap between life here in Las Palmas and life on Mars, I thought we should go here. Does anyone know where this is? Yes, it's Antarctica. And Antarctica is the only continent that doesn't have a native human population. And there's over 40 research stations on Antarctica with a permanent or semi-permanent population of 4,000 in the summer, which is the Antarctic summer, and 1,000 in the winter. And everyone there is either a scientist or some type of explorer. And there's not been really a territorial claim by a country. There has been, but it hasn't been recognized. So a lot of countries have claimed the territory, and some have claimed the same territory, but nothing has been recognized officially. So to organize Antarctica, there's the Antarctic Treaty. And the treaty establishes this as a scientific preserve, and it also establishes the freedom of scientific investigation and bans military activity. But beyond this, it's kind of up to each country to moderate their citizens. So for example, if I went to Antarctica and I committed a crime, I would fall under Swedish law and or Colombian. I'm not sure how they deal with the dual citizenship, but and you would all fall under your respective countries. So this can create situations where someone is actually committing a crime, whereas if someone else was doing the same thing, they would not be committing a crime, and the consequences could be really different for people. So to me, this seems a bit unfair and also not the best way to foster a cohesive community. But let's take a look at how that has worked out in practice. So this is Rodney Marks in black. And Rodney, let's see if I can do this without notes, is an Australian astrophysicist working for the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, which is a US organization based on the South Pole at the Amundsen Scott South Pole Station, which is, thank you, run by the US Foundation, National Science Foundation, and it's a government agency. And the station is based on the Ross Dependency Territory, which is claimed by New Zealand. And New Zealand's territory claim is not recognized by the US. So he's an Australian working for a US agency on a base claimed by the US on a territory claimed by New Zealand. Yes, it's complicated. And what happened is that on May 11th, 2000, Rodney got sick. And he went to the doctor at the station, and they couldn't really figure out what was wrong with him, and he went home. But he got sicker and sicker. So over the course of 36 hours, he came back to the doctor a couple of times, and they tried to, via satellite, figure out what was wrong with him, but they couldn't. And the day after, he died. He was 32 years old, and his family wasn't really satisfied with the official statement from the National Science Foundation, which was that he died of natural causes, apparently, and that at this time, the cause of death couldn't be determined. So because this was at Antarctica, they had to wait 6 months to fly him, because it was winter, to Christchurch in New Zealand. And Christchurch is the base for US activity in Antarctica, in the southern hemisphere. So there they did an autopsy, and they discovered that he had died from methanol poisoning. So following the autopsy, the US government and the Australian government agreed that New Zealand police could investigate this. So during the investigation, they had a lot of issues because the National Science Foundation, which was the US government agency, wouldn't cooperate. For example, they asked for a list of all the people that were working at the station at the time of his death, and they wouldn't get it. They also had problems with witnesses that they could identify because they were nationals of other countries, and they didn't respond to the subpoenas. So the only thing they could conclude was that he did not commit suicide, and he did not accidentally get poisoned. That kind of leaves us with the fact that Rodney was murdered, and this murder has still not been solved. So this creates a bit of a mess when it comes to the different governments. And this is the same rules that would apply if we go to space right now. So everyone would be governed by their home countries, and every home country would have no incentive to cooperate with the others.
Well, we have Interpol, right?
Well, Interpol has not quite reached Antarctica yet,
No,
so I doubt that they will reach Mars.
We have a basis for inter-country collaboration law-wise.
Right now, when it comes to actually doing the investigation on Antarctica, US Marshals are doing that. Yes?
I suppose that this is one of the reasons why the current space station wants to claim a separate country.
Yes. Yes, they do. Yeah, go ahead. No, I thought you were waving. Oh, you look so nice. Yeah. So this system seems to not really be working with all the countries collaborating together. So let's see if we can find another system that might work. So something tells me that this guy will have something to do with the humans landing on Mars. So Elon Musk is proposing a vision where we have a different system of creating rules and also a system of direct democracy. So he's proposing that for every single decision and every single rule, we vote by popular vote. And it's essentially an extreme version of Switzerland. And every rule should have an expiry date. So if you have a law, it's going to expire inevitably, and we have to make a new one. And the law should also be able to be recalled by a popular vote of only 40%. So this means that laws will be easier to recall than to make. So he's taking a very libertarian approach. So what I think he's forgetting is why we're on Mars. So most of the stations and the missions to Mars have the purpose of turning a red planet gradually into a planet that looks like Earth through terraforming. And if we have that as a basic mission, how can we make every decision by a majority rule? So that will make it either really slow and disjointed, the whole process, or perhaps we'll change our minds a week in and decide that we want to have a rave party instead. Who knows? Because we can make any rule. So going back to the legal foundation of creating a legal system, there's a set of theories. And I want to talk about two primary theories that historically everything can kind of be tied back to. So there's either natural law or positive law. The natural law is based on the fact that law is seen to be part of human nature, that we have an internal moral compass that is the same for every human being. But it's very much linked to the myths and beliefs that we talked about before. So they're usually tied to religion and seems to be stemming from some type of godlike creature. So you probably heard this language when we talk about human rights, the right to life, the right to freedom, and they say that they are inherent rights. That means that it's natural law that they're referring to. Positive law, on the other hand, is law that comes from authority. So if it's an official government in an organized society, they have the power to state any laws. If you go to the other end of the spectrum, there's obviously a bit of interconnection here. Yes. Oh, louder. Sorry. Yes. So these are the two kinds that are historically in play, but I also want to highlight a more modern one, which is called the ethics of care. And ethics of care says that laws should be created or interpreted in the light of human interactions, but also in the light of mutual interdependencies. So in the case of Mars, individuals will be necessary for the creation of the community, in the beginning at least, and also the community will be crucial for the survival of the individual. So that also comes into effect when looking at what kind of society to create. So right now in this room, we're about the same amount of people that's proposed to go to the same first mission on Mars. So I propose that we, before we land, take a moment to figure out what rules we want to have in place and keep in mind all the different systems and the reasons why we have rules and also the mission of why we're going to Mars. So does anyone have any suggestions? Otherwise, I'll go first with a harsh one. Yeah, go ahead.
Probably base it on some existing law. There's already write it from scratch.
Okay. Which one?
I don't know which one. We're writing everything up on our way to Mars. We
Yep.
have to take around Jupiter first and then to Mars.
It will take a while, yeah. So I'll be concrete. Okay, go ahead.
I vote we choose a benevolent dictator.
A benevolent dictator that decides everything. Okay. So if we're using the Musk theory here, how many people agree to have a dictator? A dictator.
Benevolent dictator.
Yeah. So that. No, I would not be benevolent. Don't mistake.
Okay, then I vote for you.
Yes. Okay. So, but the actual rules. So for me, one of the rules would be non-government sanctioned murder would not be allowed. If we're being so specific.
No capital punishment.
No capital punishment.
Which would be government sanctioned.
Murder. Yes. So, for example, we are now in a different environment. There is not oxygen in the atmosphere. That has to be supplied by the government. So, should there be a right for every citizen to have oxygen?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
And water.
And water?
as well.
Okay. For free? Okay. For totally free. You don't have to work to keep for your upkeep. It's just free.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Okay.
Okay.
Don't those rights imply a lot of other things?
Yep.
in the background to
Yep.
it?
What about environmental rules?
Environmental rules, yes. So, what does that relate to? Destroying the planet, or okay?
Very difficult on Mars, actually.
Yeah, I think that's why we're there.
The environment, the resources.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's also relates to destroying resources on purpose. What should we do? Should that be illegal? And what type of resources?
Well, given that you're very dependent on the technology to generate the own water, you're going to want to protect the methods to do that. So, yeah, there should probably be a drive to damage the water purifier or the recycler,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
So what do we do if we become overpopulated? What is the rule for that?
Send them back to Earth.
Yeah?
Yeah, cross that bridge when we come.
Well, shouldn't you kind of head that off the path and put in some kind of not sterility, but no reproduction until the colony is self-sustaining?
I'm totally flashing to the 100.
I know. Yeah. So you're saying that we should have reproduction rules?
Yeah, because the
Okay.
colony can't support too much of an increase in population.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have a feeling before people would have arrived, they already would have established themselves as a separate nation. And when they actually arrive there, they would feel separate from Earth. And whatever command or any kind of suggestions of how things should be run on Mars would be coming from Earth, they very quickly would have gotten ignored because people who are on Mars would have seen the context a little bit better. And very quickly some kind of independence would have come up on Mars.
Hopefully, but the rules that are in place now that will be the rules for Mars are the same as Antarctica. So,
Yeah.
It seems a bit just theoretical because a lot of it's going to depend on who's funding it and pushing the system, and then there's also the matter of enforcement. I mean, you can say these are the laws. If nobody follows them, they're irrelevant.
yes,
You
that's
can't enforce.
that's kind of the next thing. So, enforcement, which is not working. Yeah. So, what are the sanctions for the rules? Are there? So, in most legal systems, we try to keep the rules and the sanctions kind of proportional, because if you don't, it creates very different societies. So, for example, if you can get a €1 million fine for writing in all caps, that might not to be proportional to what you've been doing, and that usually leads to people either ignoring the rule or using the rule to get other people in trouble. So a lot of reporting of all caps. So to apply this to, for example, overpopulation. So if someone then has a kid that they're not supposed to have, what would a sanction be that's acceptable? Putting you on the spot.
Well, there's no death, right? We've already voted for not having capital punishment.
Go ahead.
But is the colony then obliged to support the child? Because they will have to do proportionately more work to feed and maintain the urban water.
They'll have to support the child, but maybe not the parent.
Well, the other thing is because it's a very small group of people, there's going to be a lot of interdependency. Can the colony carry somebody in prison?
Can
Yeah.
they
And not
and should
performing
they
their
when you're
task.
talking about limited resources? But then again, you have the do not kill law, which is if you don't support them, they'll die, which is exactly the same. So what do you do in a hostile environment?
Could I propose that you don't have the do not kill law?
I'm serious because I'm not for the no-kill law. That was Pat, but I think a lot of us agree initially.
In an environment where the colony is hugely dependent on itself and its integrity, there could be a situation where the only way to stop the colony being destroyed is to kill someone.
A baby.
It's a system where there's inherent chance for change. Like we're talking in a sense that there's going to be an established order, but with a group that kind of size we're talking about, the whole thing can change. There's no, we're making these rules, these are rules, because they can easily be changed in a way that isn't practical in the Earth where we have the global state capitalism system. So.
Yep, it's true.
I feel that the growth should be controlled in some way. That if we just send 30 people and tell them, well, this is your space, and then you can have as much unprotected sex as you want, there's no way we could actually, stop the break of the unstoppable birth rate.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying that maybe sterilizing half of the population and having the reproductants under control or anything like that, but
Only gay people can go.
it's a cheaper than
incentive now. We're trying to populate Mars.
Are we assuming that we're going to keep on getting resources to build more and more? Because if that's going to happen,
I think that's the theory, but who knows, right?
well, then I suppose it has to be controlled yearly and then kind of be directly proportional to the amount of growth in space that we have. And anything out of that should involve some sort of sterilization or other birth control that can't be overcome. Because if we just, if another child is born, capacity is 100, if 100 first person is born, it has to be killed. Like, what the other choice we have? we're slowly going to start cutting down resources. Sorry.
But this is a bit the situation that the British faced when they arrived in the United States. And they had a huge space with huge resources and essentially to everything to develop. With the difference that there they had unlimited resources, unlimited space, and the British Empire ruling. While when we go to Mars, we have to face extremely more complex situations. And in the British, obviously, developing into the United States took a large amount of time. And we don't have that, because we cannot have serifs there and killing each other, because obviously we cannot do that. So probably we will have to establish a framework, and quite a rigid framework to go there with. That has to be approved in a way or another by all the nations, and that will be the framework where the Martians will start building. Because going there and not having a framework will be completely chaos.
And do we even know how to colonize a place where there's no native populations?
I'm not sure.
How's that?
We're not allowed to speak.
What's the point of colonizing?
British are a question here.
Race.
It's true.
Antarctica is a good model because it is not colonized. So that
It is.
a good model of a population that is not existent when we're taking over. But then, and it also has the hostile environment. Maybe you go outside without protection, you die. Then there's a polar bears, natural culling. No polar bears.
Penguins.
Penguins, less threatening.
I feel like remote tribes or something are a better model, because people who are in Antarctica, they are not, it's not their life, they're not living there, they're going to work on a scientific mission. They are still part of.
They're long, those missions
Yeah,
are
for
long.
sure, but it's completely different to setting up your life, right? They're not going to have that other life with their co-workers. They're going to work there maybe a few years, but then they're going to go back to normal society, and they're still within the grasp of.
About Mars colonies.
I'm talking about Antarctica.
I don't know if that's true. I think that, I mean, we're all nomads here. We come to a place for 2
We're in
months,
a
we're
very
establishing
established
life.
system. We're not making any rules here.
True.
We've got maritime law, like as a precedent to look at.
So Antarctica is based on maritime law, and space law is based on Arctic Treaty. So it's all kind of following that sense. So I think it's a good gesture to have the not one country rule Mars, because it's going to create a lot of friction down here, but having every country rule its own citizens while the citizens are cooperating for a mission that is so disjointed from what we're doing here. It's probably going to create a lot of friction within the group. Even if that system works, it's going to create too much friction within the groups.
Initially, you're going to, like I said, you're going to have one company sponsoring the first colony, and within that colony, yeah, you could do the very libertarian, in which everything's democracy. But yeah, it's going to get more complicated when Russia puts up a Mars base and China does.
Yeah.
That's going to look more like Antarctica, but also because they are so far removed, I think you probably have a greater chance of them banding together and starting to form their own nation and declaring independence from Earth once they become more self-sufficient.
The United States, they pretty soon. The United States, they pretty soon, because they couldn't.
The United States are dependent on Elon Musk at the moment to get stuff up there. So,
So we might not be talking about a state.
yeah,
It could be a
it
corporate.
could be a corporate colony.
Yep. And then the rules say that whatever country that corporation is incorporated in are the rules that apply for the corporation. And then for the people in the corporation that work, the citizen laws apply. So
That's Earth law, though, isn't it? They could just say no.
they could once they get there, but the law that is dictated for them before they go, as it is
On
now.
Earth, yeah.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when you're on Mars, are they going to care?
Well, I think they want more supplies.
I mean, you look at companies like Uber, they love to break the rules. I mean, if they have the opportunity on Mars to break all rules, there's no consequence whatsoever.
Well, they still need supplies from Earth, so there's a lot of consequence. So if Uber goes bankrupt on Earth, they're not going to be able to send supplies.
That's the case with our.
It will take quite a while to
you already set solar panels on rovers and these kind of things, don't you? So the power
But the machines to keep the economy going will eventually go out, and they're much more complicated to be firmly in place. So you're going to be dependent on Earth to supply for quite a while.
Until the moment happens that they are self-sustainable, and that's where they'll be able to say, okay, fuck it all.
Yeah.
And right, so one way or another, when they arrive, or 2 years later, there'll be one when they'll be able to say, fuck off.
Yeah, but then you're really tied to, if your technology backfires and you're stuffed, then you're really looking at Earth again to bail you out, right?
Plus, Earth will also be really interested in the resources, so that's looking at war, right? Because Earth can still send people to Mars.
Will have value for Earth.
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, it's supposed to be a new civilization of Earth, right? It's not Martians coming to Mars.
so they will have a big edge, and everything that we do will be extremely interesting. They will be able to sell it. Whatever they do, even the way they spend the day, will be valuable as research to be sold to Earth. So essentially, they will have the finances.
And I don't think it's realistic to think that there's ever going to be a real cutoff between Earth and Mars.
Yes. So, in summary, a lot of different things to consider, and a lot of them we can't really solve. So even if we have rules and we have consequences, we still have to enforce them. Do we have a police force? Do we have a court system? And is that AI based? Is it based from Earth? Is it a tribunal on Mars? And so on. So all of these things we can't really solve for right now. So the only thing I guess we've decided is that I will not be the dictator, and let's leave it at that. That's it.
Do you have any questions? After
Yeah, okay.
Have you ever grown potatoes from your own feces?
I have. In my backyard growing up, yes. Yeah.
You had that look.
That came through. That came through.
Is there a good example of a community civilization successfully switching systems? Like, because what we've been talking about is there's this period of getting to Mars and like establishing themselves, and then sort of ongoing terraforming.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like those two different setups need different rules. So can there be a good pivot?
The U.S.
Yeah, before the British colony.
So
The Chinese one is the model not to follow. Just murder everyone until no one left and then.
But then that's China's actually one of the most efficient places because a decision gets made and it gets done. Nobody argues. So it's one of the most flexible.
I meant the Cultural Revolution, not having
Okay. Yeah. As they are now, they're like of all the major countries, they're the most flexible because they can just change their mind and it gets done.
I use Singapore as a
There's no
better
arguing for
example.
10
Yeah.
years.
But to answer the question, I think the most immediate switches happen after a military coup or a dictator dying or coming into power. So if you would want to do it quickly, that's I think the options we have from history. But there's also been gradual changes, but they've been longer in time coming. But usually it's because of civil unrest in some form.
Probably something you build in as group workers to begin with. A group this size, like you said, you can do it all directly. But as the
Less than
economy-
150, so
as
yeah.
the economy grows, you're going to recognise there's points, a grey area, where you're going to have to change character.
So maybe what we should do is send the first 100 or how many other people there and make them set it all up, and kill them all off, and then send the New York lot, and they can then establish a different set of rules.
Yes.
Or
Or-
you guys seen this film called The Moon?
No.
Okay, so the idea is that you just send one person and a lot of computers, and he just oversees them. So no rules need to apply. He just needs to be there to maintain shit. Everything else happens automatically.
So he's a dictator with the power of everything.
No, he's actually a slave of the corporation.
Ah, okay.
The other way around.
Well.
Watch the film. It's really good. The Moon.
So, are there any formalized bodies having these discussions?
Yes. And the conclusion is the Antarctica thing. They are still very set. The model for Antarctica is the official UN Space Foundation and International Space Foundation's proposal. They still want to go with this.
Even though it's not working in Antarctica.
Well, I think they think it's working.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it's maybe not entirely working. Yeah. Because Antarctica establishes that it's free for everyone to come and to investigate something. No one really owns it, but the problem is that Antarctica doesn't really have anything that anyone wants, like resource-wise. But not as many.
There's actually, I think in the 1980s or so, Greenpeace had a decade-long campaign where they established rules that prevent mining in Antarctica for I think 50 or 60 years. So
Yeah.
soon they will come up again and they have to go.
But they keep to renewing it, so that's why that's not happening. But having a rule that you cannot extract natural resources on Mars is not going to be possible. So it means that every country will, and every corporation that can get there will want these things. So the rules that are in place for Antarctica, with a really peaceful scientific environment, cannot really be transported to Mars offhandedly, but that's what the proposal is officially.
How do you envisage the first population of Mars happening? Because you're talking about the UN space system, so I mean, do you expect
I'm not
the
saying-
US government to be running this, or
I don't think the US government will be first. I think an organization or maybe United Arab Emirates will be first. I don't think the US government will be first. Money.
well, America has all the money.
They're not applying it to the space program at the moment. At the same. So, to me, it seems that whoever goes will abide by the rules of the community because they have to have their support to launch.
See it like another gold rush, though.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah, and the question is, at what point? Because the first mission, you can't just take a boat over like you did with Gold Rush and then
Yeah.
take horses.
But for me, the first mission, if I was in charge, I would really prefer there to be some sort of dictatorship, because if everyone has to be in consensus for every decision, you're not going to get anything done. Because there's always going to be that one person that's always opposed.
Like a military
We're back to
operation,
the
basically.
benevolent
Yeah.
dictator.
Actually, Janet, sir, I was going to ask you, what's your personal opinion on that? What would you do?
I really like the idea of a dictatorship, but it's also because I have no intention of going. So I just think that that's going to be the most efficient way of establishing the first colony. But I also don't think that we want to go down that route for the long term. So,
Dictatorship is also saying like a military order.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And power corrupts, ultimately.
Yep.
Ultimate power.
So they would maybe establish preconditions that have to be met for them to dissolve the dictatorship, like when they've reached a point where. if
Sure,
that's even
but
possible,
once again,
yeah.
they're not going to care. So I think it's essentially going to be Lord of the Flies, but with technology. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Very cheerful. Very cheerful.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.